Section 15, Costco Food Court, November 2014 to February 2015. Age 25, $11.50 hourly. Chapter title, The Swift and the Sad. I had been applying for any position at Costco for months because my grandma said it was a great place to work, and I was finally called in for an interview. They had little to question me about in terms of qualifications, and they were more interested in my motivation and availability. Once they confirmed I was willing and able, I was hired on to the food court. There were only two positions, the front and the back. The back prepared all the food, and the front ran the registers, worked the ovens, and maintained the hot shelf display which customers could see. They immediately threw me up front without any training. This made me nervous at first, but I soon realized it was all about speed. Nothing was complicated, only the hustle mattered. The register reflected this in its fully mechanical keyboard and simple software display. All inputs gave an immediate response, unlike some delayed touchscreen point-of-sale systems I had used in the past. It was old, but damn did it work fast. Our front counter was situated immediately past the main store registers, so after the customer finished their bulk shopping, they could jump right in line for our famously cheap hot dogs, pizza, and enormous sodas. The food was so affordable that the line often reached 100 feet long. Although I had worked point of sale before, I was always nervous about giving back correct change. This job beat that fear out of me pretty quickly. The pace was demanding, and soon I had all the menu prices memorized. I could practically return change without even looking down at the drawer. Between orders, I yelled at the top of my lungs into the crowd assembled before me. "Everybody get in line! Keep it orderly!" This sounded harsh, but these customers were like livestock, each budging each other and fighting amongst themselves once they reached the counter about who was first. After a few skirmishes, I had to be strict. We got away with saying things that other fast food joints could only dream about because the Costco Food Court was all about volume. Customers who expected me to sort out who was in line first would get a stern, "I don't care, let's keep it moving, who's got their order ready and their money out." As the amount of available food left on the hot shelf dwindled, it was the front's responsibility to call back what was needed, and then to pull it out of the oven before it fell on the floor. In order to do this, you had to tell whoever was waiting to order that you'd be right with them in a second, which only made them and the 50 people behind them more impatient. I was a fit young man at this time in my life, and I would often find myself in what sports athletes call the zone. I didn't walk from the oven to the hot shelf to the register, I leapt. I jogged in place constantly, and rolled the fastest hot dog in the West. I yelled the loudest for bank change from the floor manager, and I moved people through my line with a sense of purpose. I was given the nickname Swifty for my efforts. I was supposed to have learned the kitchen prepping position in the back after a few months, but they wanted to keep me up front because I was killing it every day. I learned about a scam that I believe is worth sharing here for informational purposes. We'd occasionally get a customer, we're supposed to call them members because they pay to shop there, who would give long and elaborate orders, and then change it, and then cancel it, and then change their new order, and continue to do this until you get so fed up that you might accidentally forget to charge them for something in your haste to get them through the line. I developed a method for dealing with them. After their second canceled order, I'd stop ringing it in. This was usually met with a response of, "Why aren't you taking my order?" And I'd tell them, "I'll do it when you figure out what you want." And almost every time they get huffy, but they'd quit playing games and tell me exactly what they wanted because they knew that I knew. Things were coming together. I started to believe my job worries were sorted and done with. At Costco, your wage increased for every set amount of hours you put in. As an example, you might receive a $1 increase for every 1,500 hours worked, with the cap somewhere in the neighborhood of $23 an hour. This would put you in an excellent position within 5 years if they had you working full-time, and I was getting a lot of shifts because of my performance. Walking into Costco for work was fun. I'd say hi to everyone I passed. I'd do my warm-up stretches while waiting for the scheduled machine to let me clock in. I had a great rapport with my coworkers and bosses. So where had the decline begun? Management changed. Part of the reason I was hired was because the department was in trouble. The nature of that trouble became suddenly clear to me when the cool manager disappeared and was replaced with an angry old woman. She wasn't just mad at us, she was mad at the world, and I could tell from just one look at her face she was ready to make everyone around her miserable too. Apparently, she had been the manager before I was hired, and had been on an extended leave for medical reasons. Jason, the cool manager, had always been temporary, and I was the only one who didn't know. I loved that guy. I was his secret Santa and gave him a framed picture of myself. A risky gift, but he talked about how much he loved it every day, and he kept it near his liquor cabinet. I'll get back to this management change, but I had forgotten about the Secret Santa we did. My Secret Santa was a Latina woman named Iggy, who by all accounts was a hard-ass, but upon closer inspection really just wanted to get her work done so she could go the hell home. Considering how fast I worked, she took a liking to me for that reason. During my first week, she had told me that if I couldn't keep pace that I should quit. Rough, but effective. Anyways, she had gifted me nearly 20 Lincoln wheat pennies. I was really into checking all the change for these special coins at the time. I'd throw a quarter into the drawer at the start of my shift so that I could pocket them all at will without disrupting the till balance. Iggy had gone through an enormous amount of personal change to find them for me, and that was a heartwarming gesture. Back to the manager drama. Her name was Chris, and my first memory that sticks out about her was that she kept telling me to slow down. I'd be doing my thing, jogging and jumping around, and she would grab both of my shoulders to stop me. She'd look me square in the eye and explained that I needed to calm down and take a slower pace, multiple times a day. It was killing my vibe. She was actively keeping me out of the zone, and I loved the zone. Hours would disappear when I was in that working trance. Iggy noticed, and it made her mad too. We would often exchange agitated glances in solidarity. I took great pride in my food callback abilities. When I yelled for a new pepperoni pizza, it always finished cooking just as we sold the last slice of the old one. One day I called back for a pizza, and Chris yelled right after me, "Cancel that callback!" Even though she was the boss, I gave her an "excuse me" look. She told me she was in charge of all callbacks now. I felt the hate rise up within me, but it was soon extinguished with sweet malicious compliance as we ran out of that specific pizza, and I loudly told customers that they would have to wait upwards of 10 minutes. Iggy saw it all and took great pleasure in telling this story to our coworkers when Chris wasn't working. We all secretly shared the pain of working with this manager. Chris simultaneously liked me for my work ethic and hated me for my leadership, which she felt was ruining her reputation with the other workers. With her power threatened, she moved all of my shifts to the early morning inventory. I now worked with a guy named Scott, who was really chill and studying to become a priest. All we did was count boxes, buy product, and prep food for the lunch-dinner rush. He would tell me these awesome stories about his life, like how he used to drive a dump truck for a mining company. I bumped into Iggy a few weeks later in the break room. She seemed personally hurt that I had switched shifts until I explained my theory and how it was all beyond my control. Her face turned to relief, then anger. Chris was running the place into the ground, and Iggy had to pick up all the slack. I told her to argue on my behalf and get me back into the evening action because I hated the early morning. Iggy agreed. She took my story to the other workers and championed my cause for return. Whatever she said worked, because within a few weeks I was back to the evenings. They had replaced me with this rude, obese girl who also happened to be incredibly stupid. I now had to spend most shifts in the back prep area. I made pizzas and cleaned dishes at a moderate pace. This was not work I could be enthused about. I mostly talked to this guy named Kyle about video games and music. Everything came to a head when I walked in for work one evening. Iggy was working double time in the front when I asked her where she needed help. She said Chris had gotten so overwhelmed that she froze and then disappeared, and that I should find her and get her back to working again. So I went over to the back area near the soda syrup and found Chris sitting on the ground with her head in her hands. She was crying. I placed a hand on her shoulder and tried speaking with her, but she was completely gone. No response. I returned to the registers to get the line down, and half an hour later a dead-faced Chris told me to go in back and took my place. The kitchen was totally fucked, but we crawled our way back to even and never discussed what happened again. That evening I felt bad for her. Costco was grinding her up and she was too old to take it anymore. My dad was getting ready for the grand opening of a new Sweet Taste of Italy restaurant in Stillwater and needed help. I asked Costco management if it would be possible to leave for a month or two to help my father and return again. They allowed it, but told me my hour count towards a pay increase would reset to 0. I just needed to get away from Chris for a bit and let her sort herself out. Maybe things would be different when I returned.